Our next speaker has the global outlook at the situation right now. He turned his company into the fastest growing food company of the world in his tenure as CEO. Today, he chairs the very same company that operates in more than 194 countries and have more than 340,000 people employed. He'll now share his insight on the next 12. Please welcome the CEO of Nestlé, Peter Brabeck-Letmathe.
Now, I took over in 1997 as CEO, and I inherited the most successful food and beverage company that was there. So it was quite a big challenge, because when you become a CEO and you have a company in crisis, I always said that's easy. But if you take over a company that is already extremely successful, world leader in its sector, then the challenge is much bigger. And I gave the company a new vision. And the vision that you can see here is we want to grow from the respected and trustworthy food company that we are known as now, back in 1997, into a respected and trustworthy food, nutrition, and wellness company. Why did I change the vision? It was very simple. I analyzed basically the last 150 years, and what you could see is that the food industry as such, of course, had as a firm prime responsibility to assure sustenance, just to make food available to those new social class which were factory workers, who didn't have the possibility to grow their own food like their parents did when they were still living out in the countryside. So the first role was really to assure sustenance. And this was about a role for about 100 years. Then came the Second World War, and you can see then afterwards new demands from the consumer came. Convenience became much more important. Pleasure, diversity became more important. And that took us about to 1995. And then something else happens, which I will talk a little bit later on. But the expectations from the consumers to the food and beverage industry changed again. Interestingly enough, I put them afterwards, these development cycles against the income cycle. And you can see very clearly that as income increases, disposable income increases, the demand from the consumer moves from the sustenance towards more the convenience, towards the pleasure and diversity. So from a good food company, we move to become a good food, good life company. And that's quite a difference. And when you look at the development, you can see this in this chart here. In 1997, I created, based upon this, a nutrition strategic business development. Some years later, I moved it, and I convinced my board and my company that we should become the world leading nutrition, health, and wellness company. We then set up a globally managed business, and then afterwards we started to make acquisitions in order to become what it is just now, with the latest creation that we did, which was in 2014, the Nestlé Skin Health, offering nourishing solutions for the skin, and hence opening further dimension between nutrition and health. I mentioned before that there was something happening in 1995, something that most people, also those from market research, did not realize. And I think it's best shown in this chart here. You see, life expectancy in 1800 in Europe was 32 years. 32 years. And since then, the caloric intake of the population increased through and thanks to the food industry, which made food available in a safe form. And you can see how proportionally with the adequate food intake and caloric intake, life expectancy had been increasing during all these years. It was not the only reason why life expectancy, of course, increased. The advances in hygiene, in pharmacy, in medicine, etc., of course, it also. But there is a clear relationship that when you don't have sufficient caloric coverage, your life expectancy is suffering. But then in 1995, and I say 1995, reality it was not this 1 year, it was in this period, something happened that changed completely the paradigm of the industry. And that was that for the first time, when you started to take more calories, your life expectancy didn't increase, your life expectancy started to decrease. That's a huge paradigm. That changes the whole industry. Because you cannot grow your company anymore with the old paradigm, because basically you lead to chronic diseases like overweight, diabetes, and things like this. You have to change, and the change comes that it is not more calorie, it is better calories, less and better calories. So that was very important. I just wanted to show you that how a single event can change a whole industry and the rules of the whole industry.
What do you actually see as the biggest challenge for the food industry right now?
The biggest challenge in the food industry right now has to do with what I showed you on the graphic before. There's a paradigm change. People don't want to eat and should not only don't want, should not eat more, they should eat better. That's what really the big paradigm is. At least in the developed market and in big part of the society of the emerging market. We should not forget, however, that we still have close to 1 billion of people who are hungry, who are dying, who have a life expectancy which is as low as I showed you on the graph because they don't have sufficient caloric coverage. So you have to run, as a food and beverage company, a double strategy. You have to assure that you bring access to an adequate caloric coverage to everybody in the world, and for those who are already eating sufficient, that you start to improve the quality of the nutrients that you're bringing them. That's a challenge.
Just thinking, what do you think, these things are out of our hands, but what do you think the CEOs have to pay most attention to towards the next 12?
The next 12 seconds? The next 12 months?
Not seconds, let's take months.
The next 12 months. Well, I think here in Europe, of course, the biggest question mark that we're going to have is, of course, the UK, and this can provoke turbulences. I think it is absolutely almost incredible, the timing of the UK talking about leaving Europe. The UK is the only country today within the European Union that has a bigger deficit than what Maastricht allowed them to do. They have a 5.8% deficit. Who is financing it? It's basically the other European markets who had made order in their household, and therefore they have an accident, cash accident, which is financing today the huge deficit of the UK. And then saying, you know, those guys who are helping me and financing me, I don't want to be with them anymore. Well, I don't know whether they have thought this really well through. But that's the biggest issue here in Europe that we are going to have. Worldwide, I would say, I would be, again, I'm an optimistic salesman. I mean, I cannot be otherwise.
So they should actually be more optimistic.
Of course. I mean, look at the great opportunities we have today in Africa, for example. Yeah? I mean, if I just look at yes, there is some problem area. But we have 54 states, 39 have a stable democratic system, have a growth rate, economic growth rate, which is bigger and more impressive than all the Asiatic countries. Yeah, and then you have some 14 countries which are a mess. But okay, why don't you invest in the 38 which are fine? Okay, another great opportunity, growth opportunity. So I would say I'm not very much worried. The only thing is that we have this problem here, and then let's see what the Americans have up for us. Will be interesting anyway. Will be a great show. Will be Hollywood, Hollywood at its best, I would say.